Today we're going to be joined by Tony Anthony, following an abusive upbringing which ultimately turned a 4-year-old child into a hardened and professional killer. As an adult, he travelled from China to Europe to North America, across the Mediterranean onto the Middle East. Tony became an elite bodyguard protecting some of the world's most powerful people. Following personal tragedy, Tony's extreme discipline and martial arts philosophy quickly turned. He began to use his skills for illegal means and highly destructive, bloodthirsty pleasure. Tony hit rock bottom when he eventually was imprisoned in Cyprus. It is there that the visits of a stranger, he was introduced to a reality and life-changing power of Jesus Christ. Though the prison walls held him, he found himself as a free man. This was just the beginning of a complex and fascinating testimony. To give us an insight into his real life on how it was turned around through Jesus Christ, we are now joined by Tony Anthony. Tony, how you doing?
Hello, Cyrus. Really good, thank you. Good to see you today.
Thank you so much for joining us. What a powerful story you've got. What a powerful life you've lived, Tony. Can you just take us all the way to the very beginning of your life? Age 4, your Italian father had multiple sclerosis and your Chinese mother decided to send you to China to live with your grandparents. What was the life for you and what do you remember from it?
Yes, well, you know, Cyrus, actually, my dad was part Italian, part Maronite. Maronites originate from Lebanon and Cyprus. And my mum, yes, Chinese. But yeah, my dad had multiple sclerosis when I was born. My mum had postnatal depression. And so really she didn't want me as a child. And so they were struggling financially and they couldn't afford to care for me. And so in desperation, they sold me to a man in China. He wasn't my grandfather, he, as some think, but a man that my mother was once due to marry in a arranged Chinese marriage. But she was waywardly broke away from that to marry my father instead. But when money became tight, she turned to the one person she knew who had the resources. And so from what I understand, I was trafficked to China through the triads, which are like a Chinese mafia. I was only just very small. I was only about 4 years old, but really everything changed instantly.
What do you remember from that whole experience? You say 4 years old. Obviously 4 is very small, but what were your earliest memories?
Well, really, I just remember the heat. I remember looking for my parents, my mother, my father. Even though my mother didn't really want me, I didn't quite understand that at the time, but I was still looking for them. And also the man who raised me in China was very harsh. Whenever he would speak to me, he would always hit me, slap me. He would use a bamboo cane and hit me on my head, my face. And I remember vividly him making me bleed every day of my childhood.
What were you thinking at that time? Because you obviously, it was an emotional time, you're obviously looking for your parents as well. What did you think? Where did you think your parents were at that time?
I did not have a clue. I was hoping they'll be in the other room. But not much of that can I remember now. Just the fear. And the man who raised me, he actually raised me as a Buddhist. So I didn't believe in God or anything. And of course, I began to realize that he was a grandmaster in Kung Fu. And that's why he was so harsh with me.
And then that actually led you into getting into Kung Fu, didn't it? What age were you when you actually started to learn about it?
It's hard to put a finger on it, but it felt pretty early on, as soon as I was out there. I remember one night, one morning, it was still dark and being woken up by a bucket of water being thrown over me. And I remember vividly screaming and the one thing he did not like was any crying or screaming. He wanted silence. So he'll beat me until he would knock me out. But, you know, I trained from a young age in Kung Fu, and this was forced on me. We would learn Tiger style, which is quite a ferocious, aggressive and unforgiving technique. And my training really was quite brutal and constant. I can't put a finger on how many hours in the day, but we were training all day long and it felt like into the evening as well. And no matter what I was doing around the home, we would always be in a state of training all the time. Really, my whole identity was stripped away. And as I got older, I feel that in many ways, I was weaponized. I had a weaponized version of myself, I suppose.
Do you feel your memory was sort of erased and you were, not say brainwashed, but you were asked to kind of forget about your parents? You're now living this new life. This is now your future. And this is pretty much the norm. I assume you didn't have other people to talk to or anyone telling you, wow, this is a bit strange. You're not living with your parents. You moved all the way to another country. Was that starting to feel normal to you?
Yeah, I'm not sure it ever felt normal to me, but it was. I had no choice in the matter, and it just felt in many ways something like dying. I felt that many times throughout my childhood.
I can't even begin to imagine what that would have been like. I've got a daughter now who's 17 years old, and I looked after her as a child and as a baby and everything else. 4 year old is still a baby. I mean, for you to grow up throughout all those years without really understanding the real situation and maybe even love and caring, or having that parent who would just give you that shoulder for you to cry on. And you were obviously brought up in a very strong and solid, disciplined and a little bit of violence background as well. What was that like for you?
Well, there was a lot of violence, but it's really interesting because there's a lot of misunderstanding about martial arts, and of course, being raised as a Buddhist also. And I think the amount of violence and discipline depends on the heart and the purpose behind it. But, I think the tradition of martial arts was designed to develop discipline and, through Buddhist teachings, inner peace and even spirituality. But in my case, to be honest with you, it was used to cultivate control and violence mixed together. I had no peace. I had, no, there was really quite a lot of emptiness. And I think family is so important. Having parents that love you means everything. I didn't really have that. And I later, 12 years old, returned to my parents. And even then, my mother still never wanted me. It's just one of those things I lived with. But so that was always missing. I had no peace. I think just I was trained in precision, and I think martial arts can be redemptive in that way, but they can also be very destructive, when, well, I guess with that level of brokenness that I was forced into.
Tell me about that time when you actually were reunited with your family, aged 11 or 12 years old. That's some years from 4 years old. Did you have any sort of contact with your family before that?
Oh, yes, I did. In actual fact, there was a point where I would actually go to visit home, but that's a little bit complicated. As I say, there was this arranged marriage and there was an exchange of money. That's what it was all about. But as I got older, I was actually visiting my parents, once a year, I believe. Wow. And then, of course, when I was back in the UK, by the time I was about 12, I would also then return back to China because I'd be fighting in competitions. It was all very weird. It was very strange. I felt perhaps a lot more relationship from my father. But my mother, really, there was just nothing at all. And in many ways, that was what I was quite used to in China anyway.
So you got into martial arts. You were doing competitions, is that correct?
Yes, most of the competitions I was fighting in were illegal. They were often organized mostly by the triads. And it was not really about fighting at all. It was actually largely about gambling. I don't mean to generalize, but gambling is quite a thing in the Chinese culture. And so really, I was fighting really from my teenage years, fighting in competitions that were not regulated. So there are hardly any rules, and it was last man standing. And I was just very lucky. I never lost a single fight.
And obviously, if you probably lost a fight, maybe your life could have been taken away. Was it that dangerous?
That's what it was all about. I just had to, but to be honest with you, it wasn't. What was more important than losing was to not dishonor my teacher, and otherwise, well, he'll beat me anyway. But it was just better that I won, and I did. And then I began fighting under a Chinese given name in the World Championships of my style. And I actually held the world title for 3 years in my style, which is Tiger style.
That's amazing. Looking back now, do you think this was a very well organized criminal organization who actually kind of doctrinated you into a certain way from a very young and innocent age of 4 to put you into that mentality of fighting, entering these competitions, and that was their main objective at the end of the day, was to make the most out of you at that time?
Yes, literally, that's what it was all about. And also my teacher, he would always be betting money on me. I always saw, I didn't know who was betting what or for who, but lots of money exchanging, and I just had to go in the arena and not lose.
When you look at some sorts of combat sports, you look at boxing, you look at karate and martial arts and such things, they often teach discipline as well. And I'm personally a boxing fan, and I was also did a little bit of karate as well when I was younger. And it did teach discipline, but what it seems to have taught you was violence, really, wasn't it? Rather than showing respect, it was the opposite side of the coin, really, wasn't it, for you?
It was enormously about discipline and respect,
Okay.
but its application was contrary to that. And so the very fact that we were fighting in these competitions, and it was ultimately about winning bets, and I was just the horse they were betting on. When I returned to the UK, I was actually sponsored by an organization to continue training in London. And that organization, I began working with them as they were training people how to become bodyguards.
Okay, so tell me about that time, your time in London, and your life then changed. You were obviously competing and you became the world champion in Tiger, in martial arts and such things. And then you became a bodyguard. Tell us about that. How did you get involved in that?
Well, yes. Well, I was sponsored by the International Kung Fu Federation in Switzerland. And so they sponsored me to continue training in London. That's where I was developing my own technique, doing the competitions at the same time. But they had another arm in the organization where they would train men and women who were mainly coming from a military background. And we would provide a whole host of training courses, everything from the use of weapons, languages, surveillance techniques, bomb disposal. My job was teaching hand-to-hand combat. That's what I ended up doing. I was working across Europe at the time. I was based in Switzerland for a little while. I was just teaching people hand-to-hand combat and also how to fight with a knife. And that was my job. And one day somebody, saw me, one of their clients saw me doing some ridiculous things in the gym, I'm sure. And they asked if I could be their bodyguard. But I wasn't trained. But the proposition was put to me, and I gladly jumped to it, and I began doing the training, and I was the smallest and youngest bodyguard in the organization. The only reason why I did so well is because I guess I could fight well. And I was only guarding just a handful of people, really.
During this time of your life, what ambitions did you have before this person approached you to be a bodyguard? What were your ambitions? What did you think your future was going to be?
Well, it's interesting. I've not been asked that question before. Well, I think that, this was the beginning of my ambition perhaps evolving. And I got a taste of it, getting out of the sweaty, smelly gym and working in the field. I worked for a very wealthy individual, a businessman in New York, and an Arabic ambassador. And to be honest with you, I was enjoying that. But I don't know. I think I had an emptiness in me. I was looking for something. I didn't quite know what it was. But I think, as I say, I go back to that point about family. And while I was lacking in that area, one day I was in London and I met this girl. Her name was Aya, and she was from Sweden. She was a law student in London, and to be honest, she became my ambition ultimately. We fell in love, and that emptiness was kind of filled and dealt with once and for all when I met her. She was my whole life.
You're talking about obviously living in China, and there's a very much of a Buddhists as well in the religion and such things. You talk about the spirituality of Buddhism, but really it seemed that it was coming across more for the martial arts aspect of it and the discipline and everything else. Did you have any spiritual searches? Did you ever wonder anything about God, or did you ever look into that? Was that an interest to you? You talked obviously about feeling empty inside. Was that ever a question of who is God?
To answer your question, which is again an excellent question, I think I remember at many occasions calling out into the darkness for something bigger than me, just to help me. No help came. And the way I was taught about Buddhism, to find that strength from within me and through the technique and the process that goes with that and the training. To be honest with you, I felt that I was the answer to my problems, and it really did depend on me, and I would follow that. But then again, I remember when I returned to England when I was about 12, and my dad was a Catholic, and I remember on one occasion I found him head bowed, eyes closed, and muttering something. I said, "What are you doing?" He told me he was praying, and I laughed. I remember laughing at him, and I can't remember what he said to me, but I was mocking him, and I thought it was ridiculous. God, no, it didn't really. I didn't waste any of my time thinking about somebody who wasn't there and who never helped me. Yeah, it wasn't something that was important to me. And when I met Aya, who became my fiance, again, it was something we never spoke about. It wasn't really featuring in my life whatsoever.
You know, often when children experience their parents being divorced or major things happen in their lives and things change in a child's life, sometimes they can end up blaming themselves. Maybe they're the cause of certain situations that are happening. After you were sent over to China and living in China and growing up without your parents and becoming a teenager, did you ever at any stage blame yourself, thinking the reason you're in China and away from your parents, it was because of you?
Yes, most certainly. That's quite insightful, that question. I for a long time, I remember through my childhood thinking that, I was bad, I was no good, I'd done something wrong again. I remember even when I was with my mother and father, when I was very small, my mother smashing a mirror over my head. I think I was jumping up and down on the bed and she smashed this mirror over my head. And I remember the stickiness of my blood around the mirror, taking it off. And I remember another time we were in a car and I was screaming. I don't know what on earth was going on. And she was in the car and she was threatening to drive the car into the wall and kill us. And I always felt she hated me, and I always felt no, I was no good at all. And I certainly felt that way in China, the way I was raised and the way I was beaten, and I felt always filthy and dirty. And the only way I could really remedy that was by excelling in what I was being taught. And I think that's what pushed me. And I found a lot of safety in my discipline, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it was also maybe like I guess it was like your comfort blanket to a certain way of your escapism through martial arts, of everything maybe that was going through in your own personal life, and you had something else to control and something else to focus and kind of forget the real life of what you were living at that time. There was a particular time in life after becoming a bodyguard, your life actually changed and turned around for the worse, and you ended up in prison. Do you want to give us an insight into what happened?
Yes, Aya and I had been together for a little over 3 years, and I loved her so much. She loved me, and we got along really well. And she was the best part of my life back then. And I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. And so now we were getting ready for a wedding. I was working in Italy at the time, but that's when I received this terrible news that Aya was in a friend's car in London, and there was another car coming the opposite direction with some men that were drunk, and they crashed and they killed her and her friend who was driving. And the moment that happened, there was something inside me that really snapped. I really didn't handle it very well. She was everything to me, and I just really became very, very angry and depressed, and I was all over the place. I was really confused, and I honestly, Cyrus, I didn't want to be here, and I was thinking about how I could just end it all. But instead of hurting myself, I found it easier to hurt other people, and I found myself just being ridiculous. I was becoming very spiteful and provoking people. If I'll be very rude to people, and the moment they would say anything to me, I'd really lash out on them, and I began attacking people. I broke more arms and legs and jaws and backs than I can tell you, and I'm so ashamed of that. And I was also working at the same time as a bodyguard, and we were in the Middle East on a number of occasions when we were in the line of gunfire, and there were terrorists trying to kill my boss, and it was my job to protect him, and I killed a number of them in this way. But I was doing my job as a policeman or a soldier would do. But it's one thing to take a life and another thing to not care about life at all. And I really didn't. And I was just spiraling out of control. I even got involved in debt collection because my boss gambled. And if somebody owed him money, then I was the lunatic to go and collect the money for him. And again, those situations only ever turned violently. And finally, we were in Cyprus. I was working there, and that is where my dad asked me to help him with a very large amount of money. The money was for an operation that could have maybe helped him, this trial procedure, and he asked me for this amount, and I said yes. And I didn't have that money at all, but I was deciding, well, I knew exactly where to get it from. I was just going to take it by force from the people I was collecting debts from. And I think it was about maybe a 2-week period. I began doing robbery, burglary, fraud. And there were 2 occasions people tried to stop me, and I really attacked those people severely. And I gave the money to my dad, and finally the police in Cyprus caught me, thank goodness.
And you went to prison, and for how long?
Well, I was put in prison for just a very short 3-year sentence. But I was in Nicosia Central Prison. Nicosia is in the middle of Cyprus, and part of the prison's in the Turkish part of the island. And I was actually in that part of the prison. And it was a crazy place to be. It was no segregation. Everybody was mixed together. Murderers, pedophiles, terrorists, rapists, you name it, all mixed together. And people got so badly hurt in there. Men were beaten in awful ways, cut with blades, gang raped, killed. And really, I deserved to be there. And I think one of the things that really, really ate away at me was that none of my family, my parents, I was hoping they might write to me, but they didn't. And that really infuriated me.
You talked earlier about having this anger, having this frustration, not even wanting to live life anymore. And obviously this is clearly a build-up of you growing up with so many questions to be answered and a frustration of not having that love around you, and you had to lash out and you had no feelings for someone else's life. What can you give advice to anyone watching today who may be going through similar situations? They feel the life and the world hasn't treated them in the right way, and they've had different situations. Maybe it's a divorce or not having parents around, no love. And they feel this anger building up inside, and they can just take one small little incident, one small spark for their whole life to change and them to make the wrong decision. What can you tell that person today?
Well, I would like to answer that question directly by highlighting about this one particular person who did write to me when I was in the prison. His name was Michael Wright, and I received this letter one day. And he told me in the letter he was a Christian missionary from Carrickfergus, from Northern Ireland. And he was in Cyprus as a missionary. And he told me that he saw my picture in a newspaper, and he offered to visit me. And honestly, he offered to send me books and magazines and whatever. And he was praying for me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I threw the letter in the bin. I've never heard of anything more ridiculous. As I said, I wanted my parents to write to me, and now I got some weird Christian writing to me, and I didn't like it. But I heard from another prisoner that in the prison, the visit room, your visitor could get you Coca-Cola. And in our prison, we were drinking dirty water. And I only changed my mind and invited this Christian missionary so I can get a Coca-Cola from him. And I was thinking, if he tries to Bible bash me, I'm going to hit him or kill him. I was literally thinking that way. I was filled with anger, you see.
Yeah.
But I remember first meeting him. He was always smiling like an idiot. I never liked him. I was always very angry and miserable. But I remember him saying to me, Tony, he told me in the very beginning, that he's there because Jesus Christ changed his life. And Jesus Christ, I was thinking, what on earth are you on about? And he told me that he was there not to preach at me, but to be my friend. And Michael visited me every Thursday for 3 years. And, we eventually became friends because Michael never gave up on me. But in actual fact, what Michael said to me one day was what was going to really change my life. He told me that, and this is my message to anybody out there who's really broken and in need of an answer. This is what Michael said to me. He said to me, Tony, there is a God. And God is real. No, you can't see him, but he's much like the air you're breathing. You can't see that, but that's real. You can't see gravity, but gravity's real. Well, God is also real, he told me. And, he told me how God's a creator God and how he loves us and has created us. He knows us by name. He told me that God knows how many hairs on your head. He knows your DNA. He knows your thoughts, feelings, and anxieties. And Michael told me that God gave us rules. Don't lie, don't steal, don't kill, because he knew that we'll be safer and happier that way. But with our free will, we've all broken God's rules. We've all turned our back on him. And because God is holy, and holy means perfect, and heaven is perfect, we are all condemned before this holy God. And Michael said to me that, all of us, we deserve to go to hell. But he also explained that God did not create us to send us to hell. He actually created us so we could have union with him in this life and into the next, into eternity. And to be able to fix that damaged relationship. That's the reason why God sent his son, Jesus Christ. Michael explains Jesus as being God. He was God's son. He came to this world to live this perfect life, but he didn't come to be good. The reason why he came was to actually journey to the cross, because on that cross, the transaction was going to be made. And Michael explained that the transaction was where Jesus was going to pay for our sin, all of the wrong things we've done. Not with money or gold that changes with value, in value, but to pay with his own blood. And he died, and according to history, came back to life again. And Jesus is alive today. He's overcome sin and death. And he said to me, Tony, even in the prison where you are, if you do 3 simple things, your life can change completely. And I remember him saying to me, number 1, put your faith in Jesus, to believe by faith, not by sight, that Jesus is who he says he is. Yeah. And the second thing is to say sorry to him for all of the wrong things you've ever done. Jesus has already died for those things. You owe him your apology. And thirdly, don't get religious. He said to me, don't get religious. He said to me, surrender your life to him. Put him first. Make him your king. Tony, if you do those 3 things, your life will change in the prison. And, honestly, they were going through one ear and out the other, all of his words, because it was quite a religious message. It really wasn't my cup of tea. Are you with me?
Yeah.
But I think for me, I struggled because I didn't believe in Jesus Christ because I was a Buddhist. Most of my friends in the prison was Muslims. What are they? Are we all wrong? Is Christianity the only right religion? I'm sorry, I didn't quite buy it. And anyway, I couldn't see Jesus. But my turning point was, if I can tell you, it was on the 3rd of May, 1991 in my prison cell. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the bars on my window that made a cross shape. And I looked at the cross and I did try to believe. I really did. Maybe not hard enough, but I just didn't believe in Jesus. I didn't really want him or any religion. I just wanted one thing. And her name was Aya. I miss Aya very much. I wish she hadn't been killed in that car accident. And the more I tried to remember her, the more difficult it became to remember her face. I forgot what she looked like. And I was really in real tears and anger. But that's when it really hit me like a ton of bricks. Because she loved me. She was with me for 3 years. She was going to marry me. And did you know she never ever saw my face, not once in all the time we were together. And that's because when she was born blind. My fiance was a blind girl, and she really did love me, I can tell you. And she never even saw my stupid face. And in that moment, I just began to realize, if a blind person can love somebody they've never seen, maybe that's how you get to know Jesus, not by sight, but by faith.
I love that.
And
yeah, I love that, Tony. Tell our viewers how your experience that you went through, you had a lovely relationship with Christ. You built that relationship with Christ. How are you using that in your life? Everything that's happened to you, how are you using that in your life today to help other people?
Well, first of all, the immediate changes I really had an immediate change in my life. I felt real freedom right back there in that prison cell, and all the way till today. I continue to share that freedom with other people. I'm the I'm the CEO of the Great Commission Society, GCS, and we are telling people all over the world. I especially love going to prisons. Our organization works in about 125 nations, and I speak to prisoners all over the world. We go to prisons, rehabs, people that are homeless on the streets. We go to schools, we go to war zones, and we share this life-changing message. And what's amazing is the application when other people hear that message and they understand the details. What was it that changed your life? And now we've got a very large team operating in our organization.
Give us a message to anyone who may be watching us today and they're saying they've done so many bad things in their own life and they're not worthy to be forgiven by Jesus Christ. They're not worthy to have a relationship with him. What would you say to that person who may be going through a darkness? They see no light, they see no way out, in the same way that you were as well. What would you say to them right now?
Yes, well, I'll say that you are exactly who Jesus came for, because Jesus didn't come for perfect people. He didn't come for the good ones, the ones that have it all sorted. He came for the broken ones. He came for the guilty. He came for the ashamed, like myself. And if you feel unworthy, you're not alone. I felt exactly the same. But the cross, tells us that we are worse than we think, but we are more loved than we ever have imagined. And God's grace is greater than your past. And, I remember the missionary telling me that we've all got a God-shaped hole in our hearts. We all try to fill the emptiness. Most people try good things, careers, employment, families, good things. But we're all still looking for more. People try negative things, alcohol, drugs, pornography, and other things. But that only makes the chasm deeper. He said to me, Tony, you put your world championship in kung fu, sex, drugs, violence, anger, religion, but you've never tried Jesus Christ. And I'm so glad that I did, because by putting my faith in him, that is when I was able to find out that God has come for the worst. Amen. And God is able to transform any life.
Tony, give our viewers a little brief insight what it was like for you after you left prison, how your life was changed and turned around to where you are today. How much of an influence has God been in your life during that time?
God has not stopped being a powerful influence in my life, and God has been with me step by step through the good times and the bad times since I gave my life to Christ back in Cyprus. There are many ups and downs and twists and turns. But I know that even when I mess things up, I can still go back to the cross. There are always people that will point the finger. But what's amazing is that Christ is always there to receive us when we go to him in faith and repentance. And, we're going into interesting situations. Most months I go to Ukraine, where we're helping to evacuate refugees and take food supplies to people that have nothing. We're working so close to front lines where we got to wear bulletproof vests, and missiles and bombs, shells are coming down. And yet God gives us this amazing peace for myself and my team as we go there. And it's absolutely the most amazing adventure to journey with God in this journey of faith, and to not just sing about it and listen to a couple of sermons once a week, but to apply it Monday to Sunday in the real world where there are real broken people, especially in this age that we're living in right now.
Amen to that. I want to say a huge thank you, Tony Anthony. Thank you for sharing how Jesus Christ found you in prison and managed to restore your real life. Take care. God bless everything that you're doing in your life.
Thank you. God bless you too.